Buenos dias. Good morning, John, and happy Friday. So today we're doing our scrying reading. Now the scrying reading is one of the few readings that we just go with the flow, right? It is the type of reading that when I started practicing this reading, my abuela would always be like, we can't really enter this reading with an expectation or focusing on questions, because what we're doing here is we're using the elements to receive guidance, right? So that's why when I send the email, I was like, we just kind of go with the flow with this one. So what we're using here is the element of water and the element of fire to provide us this guidance. This one particular candle doesn't want to go on. So really, we're just going to go with the flow. Now, this one is a little bit fast paced, and there's going to be also moments of silence, because all that I'm doing here is I'm telling you what I'm seeing in my third eye. So hopefully that makes sense. So let me go ahead and kind of turn this off. And we are going to zoom in. And we're just going to begin. So I'm just going to start saying things as I see them. And then as soon as it stops, I do like to kind of bring a few cards on the table. And then we just go with the flow. So let's go ahead and begin. So what I'm seeing here is really a time to work with any addictive behavior, right? Any bad habits. It's almost like we're taking a step toward liberation. And we're kind of recognizing free choice. It's almost been like years for your shadow work. Maybe 4 years is what I'm seeing, or maybe even more. But this is helping you see through illusions and becoming more responsible and becoming more serious. It's almost like this has been kind of like a journey in focusing on what changed you, so what's making you feel captive, focusing on illusions, on mistake. And we're kind of freeing ourselves from that. Like, we're becoming more responsible for our actions. Now, we also see moments, and as you can see, this one is kind of just getting closer, and this one's kind of moving where these two are kind of stuck together. So these two would represent that really deep energy that you have with the ancestors, with spirits. It could also be entities. It could also be entities that could have been passerbys at some point, but they decide to just hang around. And maybe you do feel these entities. Maybe it feels like a knocking, or like you may be alone in a room and it just feels like someone comes in. But I do see either active entities or active ancestors and spirit guides. Now, this almost like you've gone through a lot of crisis, or what it's almost like they're saying, like an explosion of some sort, some explosion, some crisis, something that kind of tested your faith. But this has also given you the wisdom to remain more open, to remain more calm, to not so much focus on the outcome itself. Almost like a period of healing and regeneration. So we're kind of getting rid of false hopes, of pessimism. Now, doubt and pessimism are still there. And sometimes you have like this thing that you want to, it's like this genuine need of hiding something about yourself, maybe in particular situations, but you're also working with that. So we see kind of like really moving with that shadow. We see a lot of periods of clear thinking. So I don't know if you've been practicing meditation, but we see a lot of the rational mind. We see a lot of what we would call clear thinking, simplicity. And it's kind of like in a very realistic way, because it's almost kind of showing like there's happiness, but it's also mixed with sadness in a very realistic way, almost kind of like you've experienced a fresh start. It's like something like a renewal, especially like a situation or something that might have seemed dead at some point, or something that you gave up on some point. We're seeing a renewal here. Almost like you have this outer realization of this great change that took place, but this great change that took place, it was all internally. Now, you still do struggle with the energy of fear. You struggle with the energy of doubt. Like something that holds you back from accepting change or opportunity. It's almost like there are periods where the trumpet will sound, or you'll hear the opportunity trumpet, but you still don't trust it. So we're still struggling with that. But what I see here is because we're becoming more open, we're able to see things more clearly. And as you can see, these two have remained together. This one's just kind of moving all over the place. So we're kind of learning how to focus energy or directing that enthusiasm in a productive way. Like we see this positive, but it could also still feel like it's a little bit chaotic energy. Like there's an energy here that needs to be organized or like directed. And we still feel this energy of enthusiasm, like this enthusiasm without this clear direction, right? So we're feeling this positive movement, but we're being told to organize. So organize those thoughts, organize those plans, right? We see that there's going to be good results. And I feel that part of the shadow work may be working with consequences that you never wanted to face. So it's almost like we're fully now releasing this, and it's intense, right? And there's this high degree of energy, but this is also leading you into a powerful energy, into a powerful frequency, into the frequency of courage, like the ability to defend yourself during a crisis rather than just drown in a crisis. You're able to kind of step up. Like we see a defensiveness, but it's not with tension. Does that make sense? Like we don't see a weakness. We don't see a giving up, but we're now working with also excess. We're still seeing excess, like excess energy. Like there's burdens like that feel like too much responsibility, but I feel like this is internal. And then, you know, when we saw that enthusiasm, it's almost like when you're enthusiastic, when you're in a good mood, when you're physically feeling well, it almost feels like you take on too much. And then if things that you're taking on don't come to fruition, you instantly think I'm a failure, but you still have to work with balancing that physical versus that internal energy. And that reminds me of something the elders say. A lot of times when people are truly gifted, their energy is in their gifts. So their bodies will be weak. Their bodies will struggle a lot in this plane. And a lot of times they have a hard time balancing their physical energy versus their gifts. So as you can see, it's almost like they're forming a straight line, right? And it's almost like they're forming the line of balance. So we're going to balance things. So when I'm feeling good, that doesn't mean I'm going to take on other people's burdens, because what's going to happen is that I'm going to go back to feeling the way that I was. And then it's almost like through this transition, through this change, you've seen a lot of people go. But through life itself, you've seen and you witnessed people kind of like not liking you. And maybe when you were younger, you were like, man, I don't fucking know why they don't like me. I didn't do anything to them. So we see that mirror effect with your wisdom. And people usually with these type of gifts have a mirror effect. So you're either going to bring people in or you're going to intimidate people and they're just going to talk shit. It's almost like pay no mind. You see how that straight line is happening now? It's almost like pay no mind to gossip, pay no mind to any reaction people have about you, you need to stay in the path, right? But throughout life, you've experienced that loss, that sadness, maybe even regret, right? Almost kind of like there might have been moments in your life that you didn't appreciate something until it wasn't there. And many times you will find yourself wrapped in grief, but you're beginning to recognize the values, like you're beginning to go on with life after a loss. So a lot of the regrets that you carry may be because you felt like you could have done more, maybe with someone who's no longer here. But it's almost kind of saying, see how the line is broken now? It's almost like it's kind of saying, release that, let it go. Like everything that needed to happen, happened. And I feel like you still carry some regrets internally, maybe with the loss of someone that you felt like, oh, I could have done more, or I could have given more. But you don't want to wrap yourself up with that guilt because everything was done, and it's almost kind of just clearing you from that. It's almost like somebody saying, let it go. You know, there's no regret there. There shouldn't be a regret there. It's almost like it's time to take action in that vulnerable part, in the grief, in the sorrow. Does that make sense? Hopefully it makes sense. It's like they're recognizing that you have this time to leave that, to move on. Almost like they're saying there is no disaster. There's only inner awareness of change for you now. Like a time to work with this vulnerability in silence and quiet, to look inward. And it's almost like you're feeling like this also a time to consider this higher purpose beyond your ordinary activities, right? So a lot of times I'll ask people, what are you passionate about? And they'll just say hobbies, but I see hobbies as a to-do list. I'm saying like, what are you passionate about? Like it's time for you to really, really go deeper in your higher purpose. You've always felt it and you've been kind of curious about it and you've been dabbling with it. I feel like it's a time for you to go really deep. You definitely have to avoid anything shallow, any shallow situations. You see, it's almost like you become very allergic to small talk. Like, hey, how's the weather? And it's like, I don't know, look at the sky. All right, so it's time to leave away the shallow. Anything that makes you feel smug, you gotta tap into that inner pleasure. Like finding something that you felt was missing from life. But I mean, if you see these two candles, they have not let go of each other. And I feel like this is just really the connection with you and an entity, but also the spiritual cycle that you're in, which is all inward, which is all going within. So now, once they go quiet, what we do is we pull out the cards, just a few. So what we see here is the energy of the liberated child and the energy of intuition. So liberated child shows hope, it shows freedom. It shows that it's time to let into your heart because everything is full of possibilities. Whereas before, like I said, even if opportunities were showing, it's almost like we didn't trust it. And now we're going into this thing of like, I'm able to trust this a little bit more, right? When you see intuition, it's your all-seeing eyes, quiet awakening. Now, what I love about this card is that the all-seeing eye is not in the front, it's in her back, it's in her spine. And her spine, that represents the coil of the Kundalini, right? So you're able to see a lot of situations now through the third eye, but also feel them in an energetic way. So not just visions, but maybe even possibly feel emotions, physical. It's what we call physical mediumship or emotional mediumship, right? So what we see here is things that are becoming unveiled, dreams that might be trying to tell you something. There's insights definitely coming your way. So we're gonna leave it there, all right? This reading to me is always, it's always very different because first, I never remember everything that came out through that. And second, I always have this doubt. I'm like, what if it doesn't make any sense? You know, it's like, what if it, and that's something that elders are like, it's just something that we feel. But I've never done a shell reading, any element reading that I'm just like, okay, any reading whatsoever. So as you can see, I'm nervous. I cannot wait to hear your feedback. Have a beautiful weekend. I love you guys, and blessed be. Bye-bye.